Hello and welcome back to Retro Haven, guys. If you are an 80s boy like me, you will mostly remember what happened when you first saw Streets of Rage on Sega Genesis or Sega Mega Drive based on where you live. This game was like a new life for us. We spent multiple hours with our friends playing multiplayer of this game to hell. And today I finally had time to tackle this series and see where did it come from and how did this masterpiece come to life in terms of game. Before we start, let me point into something. First of all, I'm sorry because of my voice. Finally, after 2 and something years, I submitted to the COVID and got infected with this virus. So if you don't see my face or my voice is like a teenager boy at the time of puberty, then please forgive me. With that said, this is Daniel from Retro Haven and welcome to Retro Haven new series, Streets of Rage Retrospective. In the late 80s, the gaming console market was so different from what we see today. Nintendo was a huge and established player, and Sega entered the race with Sega Master System but was not that successful compared to their giant rival Nintendo. So, when they came up with the new idea for a new console, it was supposed to be the strongest thing that the world have ever seen. And the result was Sega Mega Drive, or if you are a Western audience, Sega Genesis. Back then, Sega was a huge name in the arcade scene, and arcade scene was greater than home console scene in the 90s and 80s. So, it made sense for Sega to try to replicate what is successful in arcade and bring it to home. But it was not easy. Divisions like Sega AM1 were so successful, but there were some rivals. Some companies like Capcom created their own game and new genres were blooming out of blue. Honestly, it's hard to say where was the first point of the beat-em-up genre, but most people believe that the Kung Fu Master in 1984 was the starting point. After that, games like Double Dragon and Final Fight create a huge fuzz in the arcade, and finally they were delivered to home consoles. So it made sense for Sega to see the rivals creating a huge opportunity using this genre and try to replicate the same success. First, they did some analysis. They found out that Double Dragon is a shitty graphical game, and Final Fight was only available in arcade with amazing graphic and huge sprites for characters. So Sega tried to acquire some amazing talents and try to bring them together with the idea of creating their own beat-em-up. Their source for reference was River City Ransom, which was a great game but an underappreciated one. They chose one of the great people in Sega AM1 to direct this game. This guy was Noriyoshi Oba. And Noriyoshi Oba brought some amazing people around to create something truly fascinating. The lead programmer was Hiroshi Momota. But if you ask me, the most important person in the development cycle of Streets of Rage was someone called Yuzo Koshiro. Yes, the legendary composer himself. During development, they found out that they have to be somehow different from all the rivals. So they came up with an idea. First of all, Yuzo Koshiro had an amazing experience in the West. He was familiar with the dance music of that era, and the upbeat music that he was creating was quite something to behold. So, the team decided to go for the art design based on this music. As a result, you could see a lot of neon light that reflect themselves on the streets, and this mixture of environment and music created a unique experience for people back then. For the characters, they tried to create them as huge as possible because huge sprites was a winner back then. So they have created 3 playable characters and 5 enemies. Yes, you could see only 5 enemies beside the bosses in the whole game, but the color swap of these enemies made them a little bit more varied. The developers at Sega knew inside and outside of their console better than anyone else, so they created something very special and very smooth in the gameplay department. The scrolling was amazingly smooth and you could barely see any lag in the movement or animation. Frame rate was perfect and everything was running at a constant pace. Of course, some limitations were there. You could not see many enemies on the screen at the same time. So in order to make gameplay fresh, they have created some weapons to use. People could use bottles, knives, baseball bats, pipe, and some kind of gas grenade that I never understood why it looks like a salt shaker. Everything was almost set. They had 8 stages with their own unique identity, 3 great main playable characters with their own traits, and a swarm of enemies that can destroy you if you are not on your toes. As I said before, we had 3 characters. First one was Adam Hunter. Adam Hunter was a brawler, a street brawler, and he was an ex-cop, so his attacks were strong, his speed were not that great, and his jump attacks were well designed. Next, we have the stereotypical white person of the 1980s, Axel Stone. He was a blonde, tall white man who had a great speed and attack power but lacked in the jumping department. The third one was the female femme fatale, Blaze Fielding. She was the fastest character in the game and she had the best air attacks in the whole game, but her punches and kicks were not as strong as the other 2 characters. Each character had one special move that he could use once per round, and when you used this special move, a cop car would arrive and shoot a rocket at the screen. I still don't know how the rocket won't damage us and why the cop car won't come to help us all the time, but it was the logic of the arcade style game in home systems. You had a variety of attacks to use. You had normal punch and kick combo, and you had back kick. Yes, if you pressed jump and kick at the same time, you could hit the enemies behind you. The most important thing was stay away from the enemies so they don't attack you from both sides. The game had 8 stages. At the first 5 stages, you would see one boss at the end of the stage, but after that, the previous stage bosses would pop up in the middle of the fight in any of the stages. Especially in the final stage, that you had a boss rush that was a common thing in beat-em-ups back. Finally, you would reach the main baddie of the game, Mr. X. He was the leader of the syndicate, and they had the city under control. Even the cops were not strong enough to stand against them. So our 3 former police officers tried to create something by themselves. They tried to create a resistance, and they came for Mr. X himself. When you reach him, he will ask you that if you want to be his right hand or not, and it was one of the most clever things that I ever seen when I was that young. Yes, if you select yes, he will send you back to stage 6. When you reach him again, you have to accept his offer or fight him. If you accept his offer, you will become his right hand and the city will be doomed. But the fun thing starts when you play in 2 players mode. When you reach the final decision, if you accept yes and your friend accepts no, then you have to fight each other to the death. Yes, this is an amazing thing still today. In the end, this game was released on August 2nd, 1991 for Japan region. And soon after, the Western audience had a glimpse of what Sega had to offer in home console. The game was called Bare Knuckles in Japan, but the title changed for Western audiences into Streets of Rage. The reception was extremely positive worldwide, and this game sold like gold. People at Sega ported this game on Sega Game Gear and Sega Master System, but this was just the starting point. During the years, this game was released on almost every platform that you could. Nintendo DS, PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, just name the console and I will show you a version of a Streets of Rage 1 in the form of a collection or another way. In the end, the legacy of this game is undeniable. And if you even listen to the music of this game today, you will see how amazing Yuzo Koshiro worked for this title. Today, this game is amongst one of the top 10 games of Sega Genesis of all time in most of the lists. And that's enough to talk about the legacy of this amazing masterpiece. So guys, that's it for the video. Please like and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We will release videos on multiple game series. So let us know what other game series you want us to tackle in the comment section. And share our video with your friends because we want to have a lot of awesome audiences such as yourself. That's it, this is Daniel from Retrohaven. Don't forget to have an awesome day and I will see you guys in the next one.